Is geskakel op GROOTplaas en ons gas saam met ons vanoggend direkteur. Hy is die direkteur van Pink Wyn, asook die eienaar van BigBucks Gala. Derek, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Nice early start. Thank
nice
you.
Early start. Derek, so let's start at the beginning maybe. Can you give us a little bit more background on when was BigBucks Gala first discovered? If I remember correctly, it was around about 2011?
Correct. Yeah, could I go back a little while and just explain the history
Absolutely.
of Gala and Royal Gala? So Royal Gala was originally founded in New Zealand by a gentleman called Bill Ten Hove, and he found a different variation of the standard Gala. In other words, it was a redder color. In the 70s, it came to South Africa, and in the 80s and 90s, South Africans planted Royal Gala. And in that process, a couple of mutations, in other words, differences in the fruit was noticed. The first one being by Mr. Robert Zilch in Ceres, who discovered Royal Butte. And then later on our farm here in Elgin, we discovered Quarter Gala. Quarter Gala was planted quite intensely in the Elgin Valley. And in one of those orchards that was established on Oak Valley Estate, which is fairly close to me, the Bix Nell, new fruit variety expert, was walking through the orchard in January 2011, and he discovered a tree in the orchard that was totally unusual to the actual Royal Gala. So he then decided that this was something that he had to explore. The reason being that the fruit was a solid red color, whereas a Royal Gala traditionally is a reddish color with a stripe. So this had no stripe and was fully red, and it was fully red early in January, which was totally unusual for the Royal Gala variety, which normally only starts to redden up and get its color in February. So that was the history behind it, and how we then decided that this was worth taking forward, and we then produced the first trees. And in 2014, the first hectare was established in the Elgin Valley.
Now, Derek, is this something that naturally occurs with these trees specifically, that there are mutations and that you could, just carry on and growing from a specific mutation and later on see other mutations come from that one as well?
That's absolutely correct. So it started with Gala, went to Royal Gala, and then Royal Butte, as I mentioned previously, and then Quarter Gala, and then obviously BigBucks came along. Now, this is not unique just to a Royal Gala. We've seen mutations, and this is what growers and technical people strive for, is to investigate and constantly look for new varieties, and preferably slightly redder or better developed colors or stripes on existing varieties. Redder is better in our fruit industry. So similar things have happened to the Fuji apple, the Braeburn, the Pink Lady, the Sundowner. So all these apples have, over the years, mutations have been found, and these are purely chance. This is nature at its best, and it's not something that's genetically modified. It's there. It's a natural occurrence, and from that, for instance, with BigBucks has grown into what it has become today.
So, Derek, let's focus a little bit more on BigBucks Gala. It was awarded South African Plant Breeders' Rights only months after its discovery. Now, what did early testing reveal about its potential?
Early testing revealed something special. Because it was a fully red apple, it was perceived to be, because it got color early, it was perceived to be an apple that could be adapted to, especially to the warmer growing areas in South Africa. It wouldn't necessarily have to be in the colder areas like Elgin or Ceres. It could be expanded to slightly warmer areas, because there was a feeling and a perception, and which turned out to be true, that even under warmer conditions, the BigBucks would still get its color. and that has materialized. So that's why the popularity of the planting has grown exponentially, is the fact that it can be planted in marginal areas for the standard Royal Gala, where the standard Royal Gala wouldn't achieve the color specification needed for export.
Now, having mentioned that, more than 2.5 million BigBucks Gala trees that have been planted in South Africa by the end of winter 2025, what has driven such rapid adoption by local growers, except for it being a little bit more adapted to warmer climates?
It was something new. It was because of its full red color. It was something different to the normal Royal Gala, obviously, which I said has got a stripe in it. And there still is a worldwide. The markets certain markets have certain preferences. Some markets will prefer the old traditional Gala with a reddish background and a stripe. But the newer markets, especially in the Indian market, have taken to BigBucks because it's full red color and just more attractive, and they believe that it also comes down to the actual taste of the apple, which is superior to the Royal Gala apple.
Derek, we're going to be back with you in a second. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas vanoggend, Derek. Hy's die direkteur van Pink Wyn, as ook die eienaar van BigBucks Gala. Nou eers tyd vir jou GROOTplaas kalender. Is ingeskakel op GROOTplaas. Ons gas saam met ons vanoggend Derek Kode, die direkteur van Pink Wyn en die eienaar van BigBucks Gala. Now, Derek, in terms of the specific Gala variety, how does it compare flavor-wise to other Gala variants?
Initially, when we first started producing the first BigBucks Gala, there was a little there was confusion as to the maturity of the fruit. A traditional Royal Gala, you can judge its ripeness on when to pick it by the stripes becoming yellow in the background. With a BigBucks Gala, it was very different because it was a full red color, so there was no indicator to show you exactly when the apple was ripe. So through continuous testing over the years, we've now hit the sweet spot, as we can say, with when to pick Royal Gala, the BigBucks. And we perceive that as the trees get older, and we've seen it this past season, the quality of the fruit, the eating quality of the fruit, has become superior to that of a Royal Gala, which is also making it very attractive in the marketplace.
So the European Plant Variety Rights application was submitted back in October of 2016 already. Why did this process ultimately take more than 8 years to complete?
Yeah, that's a good question. The European Union, at the time, there were about 6 different variations of BigBucks Gala in the European theatre. Some of them called Sneeko Red, Dark Baron, Devil Gala. They were all competing for the same space. So the European authorities decided to include BigBucks and replicated trials. In other words, took newly planted trees, planted them in different sites throughout Europe, and then evaluated the fruit at the end. After the first trial, the valuation didn't give any distinct winner. So the trial was then replicated again, which takes 4 to 5 years. And the process, therefore, being 8 years, this is when now in July, we were eventually granted the plant breeders' rights for Europe, which is a huge achievement for a South African fruit variety, which has never been done before.
So when we talk about this specific apple variety, do we have any other export markets that you are excited by, except for Europe?
Yes, our biggest, well, besides Africa and South Africa itself, our biggest market has been the Indian market, as well as the Far East markets, and including China. So our biggest growth in fruit volume has definitely been in India. The EU, a very small amount at this stage because you're competing with local varieties. And there has been a bit of BigBucks sent to the UK market, which was favorably received. But the main building stone of BigBucks Gala is the Indian market, and we have daily inquiries for plant material and fruit. So that's a very exciting market for us.
So when you get those types of questions regarding plant material and the fruit, are we going to be holding on to the plant material for a while and only exporting fruits?
Our plant material is freely available through our partners in Belgium, ABCCZ, who are a registered nursery in Belgium, who have been supplying trees to India and to the rest of Europe. South Africa obviously has its own source of plant material, and although the plantings really peaked in 2019-20, we are seeing a slight resurgence of BigBucks planting again as it becomes more and more acceptable in the market. At the end of the day, the determining factor is your return back on the farm per hectare. And BigBucks is definitely filling that role as being the top producing variety in our stable at the moment.
So in terms of eating fruit, how's the BigBucks Gala been received by local audiences?
Local audiences have accepted BigBucks Gala. It is, at the end of the day, a different gala because of its color, but the eating quality is inherently Royal Gala. So it has a nicer taste. We think a nicer taste, but the parents are Royal Gala, so there is not much of a distinction between the Royal Gala taste and the BigBuck taste. It's more about the look and the presentation of the apple.
So, Derek, with this one unusual tree that started in the Elgin Orchard, it's now gained international recognition. What do you see as the next chapter for this proudly South African apple variety?
Well, to date, we've planted just over 2.5 million trees in South Africa. We have plant breeders' rights in the United States, in Australia, now in the EU, as you know. We've got plant breeders' rights pending in Chile, New Zealand, China. So we see good global growth in the variety, and we have our partners in Europe who have the rights to north of the Sahara, of the rest of the world, who have then obviously sponsored and paid for all the trial work throughout the world, and for the application of plant breeders' rights. And we have a partner in Australia who is then developing the Australian, New Zealand, and Chinese aspect of that. So we see significant growth, and we see significant growth in the Indian market, not only for the fruit, but for the planting of the trees as well.
Derek, thank you so much for your time this morning. This is gas op GROOTplaas, Derek Koder, die direkteur van Pinkwyn, as ook die eienaar van BigBucks Gala. Dis al wat vir ons tyd het vir GROOTplaas vir vanoggend. Ons hoop dit saam met ons geniet. Dan kan ons weer môreoggend.